Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for this installment of our PRD webinar series. My name is Amy Miller. We have your PRD support team on the call. We have the program manager, Chris Morris. We also have Stacy Smith, who is the assistant program manager. She'll actually be running the session today. And we also have Julie Powell, Scott McLean, excuse me, Pam Scott, and Ashley Spencer on the call. If you do need to ask questions, we're going to ask that you use the Q&A function located within Zoom, and Chris Morris will do his very best to answer those questions as we move this along. And I will pass it over to you, Stacy.
Okay, thank you for the intro, Amy. As Amy said, I'm Stacy Smith, the Assistant Program Manager for the Pilot Record Database, and today we will be going over registering or reviewing records. So thank you for joining us. Also on the call, as noted, is Chris Morris, the Program Manager, and our Pilot Record Database support team, Julie Powell, Pamela Scott, and Scott McLean. They will help us answer questions today, and they also help us whenever you have any other questions and reach out to us in the PRD support email. We're responsible for answering your questions and helping resolve issues. As Amy said, if you do have any questions during the webinar, please use the Q&A box on the bottom to submit your question. We'll either reply to you in the box at the end of the presentation or email you soon after if we're not able to answer the question immediately. In addition, this presentation will be available on PRD.gov in the resource section of our website. Okay, so for today's website, we'll be focusing on the following areas for the pilot record database. We'll be going over the origins in the PRD concept, what's in the PRD, how to register for the pilot record database for both the pilot users and the operator users. And then last, we will go over granting consent and how to review the records in PRD. And we'll close out with any additional questions you may have. Okay, so some of you may be wondering how we got here, so we'll go over with the origins for PRD. In 1996, Congress enacted the Pilot Records Improvement Act of 1996 in response to several air carrier accidents and recommendations from the NTSB. Later, the Airline Safety and Federal Aviation Administration Extension Act of 2010 was passed by Congress, requiring the creation of an electronic database to contain pilot records known as the Pilot Record Database. Its intent was to solve challenges with the record sharing under PREA. In 2021, the FAA issued FAR Part 111 to transition from PREA to the PRD. So as of today, the PRD has been available since 2017. So as mentioned previously, the PRD was established to resolve challenges with record sharing under PREA. With the PREA process, hiring employers were required to request pilot records from each previous employer along with the FAA. In turn, those previous employers were required to provide the requested information via email, mail, fax, etc. As you can see with the in this diagram, it's kind of quite a process, putting a lot of burden on the hiring employer. So with the PRD process, we move away to streamline the process and have all the information for the pilots in a centralized location, as you can see here. It really makes it a more efficient and transparent process with using the PRD instead. Okay, so with the PRD concept, the entity is required to report and review records for the Part 111 include Part 121 air carriers, Part 135 air carriers and operators, Part 125 operators, the fractional operators under Part 91, Subpart K, and air tour operators. All of these are required to both report and review records in the PRD. Now, the next couple are only required to report records in the pilot record database. That includes entities conducting public aircraft operations and Part 91 operators that operate 2 or more type-rated aircraft or turbine-powered rotorcraft in furtherance of business and the 125M corporate flight departments. Now, if you have any additional questions or need more information, you can review Part 111 or AC 12068J for additional emails. We have links posted to both of those on our PRD website, so you can go through and review the information. Now, as far as what's available in PRD today, if you were to go in there and look up information, it has current pilot and medical certificates, notices of disapprovals, accidents, and incidences. It's important to note here that both PIC and SIC incidences are available. That would be a change from PREA. That information was not available when we would supply the information. And last, enforcements. Now, starting next month, which is right around the corner, industry records will be available to include drug and alcohol testing, training qualification and proficiency records, final disciplinary action records, and final separation from employment records. So at this time, we currently have 34,000 registered users and are providing over 3,000 pilot records per month for review to the air carriers. Okay, now for the fun part, we're gonna go in here and do some demonstrations to show how to register for a MyAccess account, how to register for your pilot record database account. We'll also do a demonstration going over the pilot's record review, or review records process, how to provide consent, and we'll also show the operators how to review pilot records once the consent is given by the pilot. So some important things to note is that the MyAccess accounts that you'll use to access pilot record database are used by several different websites that are managed by the FAA. It's not just a pilot record database. So MyAccess account and pilot record database are both separate systems. You should have a single MyAccess account, regardless of how many websites you use, and it'll require an ID verification during your account creation in there. So as long as you have the MyAccess account and the correct pilot record database roles together and everything, you'll be able to access the pilot record database. Now, if you have any difficulty registering in MyAccess for pilots, we do have an alternate process where you'll submit the FAA Form 8060-14 and submit it to our PRD support. We get to those within 1 business day, or we can manually go in on our end and grant access to the air carrier that would like to review your records. We'll also send back a form to use so you can go back and review your information in PRD as well. With the air carrier operators and proxy employees, if you have issues creating an account in MyAccess, please reach out to us at our PRD support and we will work with you to set up an account. If you've had problems in the past trying to create an account, I encourage you to go in and try again. We recently made some updates to our system and at this time have about a 95% success rate. So not perfect, but we're getting there. Okay, so now let's take a look at pilots registering for PRD. First, you'll need to create the MyAccess account. So start out at our website, PRD.FAA.GOV, and you'll go to the section where it says pilots and commercial ATP or remote only. Just click on the link over here for pilot access. From here, it will take you to the MyAccess page. Make sure for the first time users, when you don't have a MyAccess account, select register now. From here, it'll take you to a page where you will register in MyAccess with your email, personal information. You'll answer some questions to verify your ID. A couple of tips when you're registering in here, make sure that your name in your MyAccess account matches your last name that's on the pilot certificate. Otherwise, we have found that pilots trying to enter the system will have issues accessing their information, and you have to go back, delete your account, and start over again. It's also important to never create more than one MyAccess account. If you have multiple accounts, it can lead to issues answering your, or actually, I'm sorry. If you have more than one account, it'll lead to issues accessing your information in PRD. And after you create your MyAccess account, you'll be able to access the system, which is the most important part. So what you'll do to access and create your PRD account is we'll go back to the PRD.FAA.GOV page. Now, when you come here, you may need to clear your cache or use a different browser. Like if you use Microsoft Chrome, use Microsoft Edge instead, because sometimes it saves the information and you might have trouble getting in. And also wait about 15 minutes after creating your MyAccess account so it registers through our system. So go through here. Again, select the pilot access. Now you will enter the email address that you use to create your MyAccess account. Select agree and continue. It will bring you to the registration page where you will enter your first name. Your last name is auto-populated from your MyAccess account. Make sure to enter your pilot certificate number, not a CFI, or if you hold any other certificates such as a UAS user, make sure it's the pilot certificate number. And also enter the most recent date of issuance. And from here, you should be able to successfully register for your PRD account. If you have any trouble accessing your information, sometimes you'll get an error. You'll get an error if the information doesn't match up. Just reach out to us, the PRD support, and we're here to troubleshoot your issue, help you look up the information, and ultimately help you access your account in the pilot record database. Okay, so now for the operators that are registering in the pilot record database, operators will start also at the PRD FAA website. Make sure that we go to the section that is labeled Air Carriers, Operators, and Proxies. Select the Tools section over here on the bottom. Once you select Tools, the next link will take you to the MyAccess registration page. And from here, it'll be the same thing for the pilots. Select Register Now, and it'll take you to the registration page for MyAccess. So for this, we recommend, I know even though you're registering for work, use a personal email so that this MyAccess account will stay with you throughout the duration of your career. If you use an account that you no longer have access to, if you have issues in the future, we won't be able to help you reset the PIN or any other issues that you may have with your MyAccess account. It's also important here, make sure you do not create another MyAccess account. We really do not, if you have the multiple accounts, like I said before, it can create issues with PRD and other systems that you're trying to access. And then once you finish creating the MyAccess account, you'll be able to register in the pilot record database to be an authorized responsible person, authorized consumer, user manager, or some of the other roles that we have to access PRD on the air carrier side. Okay, so then to complete your registration for your role in PRD after completing the MyAccess account registration, again, wait about 15 minutes for your MyAccess account to register in the system. Then come back to the PRD website. You will select tools to register your account, log in with your recently created MyAccess account. This time, make sure that you select agree and continue. You'll be asked to enter your PIN number and answer your security questions. And it'll take you to the registration page. When you register, make sure that you have the appropriate air carrier information and your role to answer the questions to complete your registration. If you're registering to be a responsible person, from there, the request will get sent to us over at PRD support to approve your account. If you're registering to be an authorized consumer, user manager, authorized contributor, those requests will go to your company's responsible person for approval. If you have any questions, need additional information, we have some how-tos at the bottom of our PRD page to reference, where we have a description of the roles available, step-by-step instructions for how to register for those specific roles. And of course, we're always here at the PRD support to answer any additional questions you might have. So with PRD, we'll be working with records. For pilots, generally log into, once you log into PRD, they'll have the ability to update your employment history for the last 5 years, review the records for any of the information you have on file, grant consent to the aviation employers. For the aviation employers, operators, and air carriers, once you log into PRD, you'll be able to search for the pilot by certificate number and name, view and save the PRD Airman record, we call it PAR for short on our end. And please remember that while we're in this process and we're transitioning from PREA over to PRD, you must still request any non-FAA records using the traditional PREA methods unless the information is available in PRD. So for pilots to grant consent, we'll start out at our PRD homepage. Make sure you enter the page under the pilot section again. Select pilot access. From here, it'll take you to the PRD page. Make sure you select your role as pilots. I know some pilots may have multiple roles as a responsible person, but if depending on where you work, but make sure you select the pilot role. Once you select that from the dropdown, select the select button here on the bottom. And from here, it will take you to the next page where you're able to access your information. Now, it's important, especially as you're starting to update and add your experience. First, we'll go over to the experience section over here to add your history. You'll type in the information over here in employer. Depending on the air carrier, it may start to autofill. And you can click on that air carrier. Select add selected. If it's your current employer, you'll be able to check this box over here. Add the new employer. And once the operation is complete, make sure you select OK. And the information will show up here in your experience. Next, you'll be able to go over to the consent section, where you'll be able to view your airman record with the information you just added. So when you click on it, it will show you a PDF with your information. Sometimes it might show up on the bottom of your browser as a zip file. You can click on that, open it, review the PDF, make sure everything in there is correct. And after you've made sure all of your information is correct, we'll go ahead and grant consent. Here, it's similar again. You'll type in the air carrier's name. It should start to auto-populate. Select the information. Next, you'll select the consent period. Their options are 30 days, 45 days, or 60 days. After that, we'll select consent. Then a box will pop up asking you to certify that all the information on your part is correct. Click agree. And once you're done, it will show that you have an active consent for the air carrier. It'll show the effective date and the expiration date. And you can also view it again here if you'd like to. Select OK. Now, once you've granted consent, let's say if you select the wrong air carrier, or if you need to take away the consent, you can click on this box over here with your active consent, select revoke consent, and that air carrier will no longer be able to access your information on there. And again, you'll get another box showing that the consent has been successfully revoked following the action. So that's it's pretty much a streamlined process. And we also have guides if you need additional information on our website to go view the resources. If you have any other questions when going there and reviewing information. So after the pilots grant consent to the air carriers, the air carrier will want to review the information in the pilot record database. So for those in the air carrier role to review records, we'll go to the PRD website. At this time, make sure to select View Records. We'll enter with the information for your MyAccess account. Make sure that you select Agree and Continue. Don't register again or reset your account. And when you come to this page, you'll be asked to select a role. So for right now, Authorized Consumer would be the role that you want to select for reviewing records. Also, if you're a responsible registered person, just a quick note that when you select this drop down, you won't see Authorized Responsible Person as an option. It'll be Authorized Consumer, User Manager, or the other roles in Pilot Record Database. Sometimes that creates a little bit of confusion. So you'll select the role, select the air carrier for the air carrier that you'd like to review the information for. it is possible to have a account to be an authorized consumer, responsible person for multiple air carriers. So those will be available here in the dropdown. After everything is correct, we'll click select. And that will take us to the next page where you're able to review the airman's records. Make sure you type in both the certificate number and the last name. Otherwise, you will not be able to pull the information for the airman. After that information is populated, click search. And as long as the airman has granted you access, then you will be able to see the consent over here on the bottom. Make sure to click the box here, add to cart. And once you click on those, click OK. It will register the action that you reviewed the airman's record and will download in a zip file that usually shows up at the bottom of your browser, where you'll be able to open that information and also see the PDF of the airman's record. Yeah. And that's pretty much, that's it. If you do not click on the download or remove, we have issues where it won't register that you reviewed the airman's record. So always make sure that you click those boxes and download the PAR when you're reviewing the airman's record in PRD. So that's pretty much it for going through the system. If you have any questions, here's a list of the available resources. Again, the slides for our webinar will also be posted on the PRD website under our resources section. And we have also some webinars, some additional webinars coming up over the next couple of weeks. In May, we'll have a May 19th. We'll be going over the managing user roles for the operators and proxies. June 16th, we know this will be a big one right here. We'll have a webinar to go over entering records. And you can also check back on our website to see if, as we have more webinars announced, to check the schedule with the Zoom information and the dates for our webinars. So that concludes today's presentation. Does anyone have any additional questions? All right, well, I see that looks like our team took care of answering. Oh, okay, I do see one question now. So in June 2022, drug and alcohol records will be available in PRD. Does this include the test results as PREA requires? So yes, starting in June, that information will be available as well. The copies of the presentation will be available on our website under resources. And that should be made available later on this week. Okay. So let's see. There are, I see one question here for how many users an operator can designate to access records. We leave that up to the discretion of the operators, But as far as a responsible person, the operators can only have one active responsible person per company. And we do go through and review that on a regular basis. Well, one more question here for how much longer until we no longer have PREA? The date to fully be transitioned over from PREA to PRD will be in the fall of 2024. At this time, we see a question here for is there a yes, we do have a list for the air carrier participation list for records. As noted, we have more information listed in Part 111 and in I can't remember all of these off the top of my head. It's Part 111 and AC 12068J. They have the, in the appendix, you'll see the tables outlined. So for Part 121, Part 135, Part 125, the operators, the fractional operators under Part 91, Subpart K, and air tour operators are all required to report and review records. As far as reporting only, entities conducting public aircraft operations, and in the Part 91 operators that operate the 2 or more type rated aircraft or turbo power engines are just required to report records upon request. And Chris, I just saw that you wanted to answer a question live. I don't know if that means you'll be coming on to chat or if you just want to leave it to me today.
Hey, Stacy. Let me see. Is that the one from Tom?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think we answered it offline, actually, the one that you were thinking of.
Okay.
Yeah, and going to see if there's any others in here that we can answer for you guys. I do see, I'm going to jump in a little bit, Stacy, and kind of, so you're not having to answer all these questions by yourself. So I see there's a question here about are we having to still mail in the 8060-12s? And just so everyone knows, so the -12 is the form used to request records from previous employers. So today, yes, you still have to use the 12 and the 12A to request records. And then starting in June, you will continue to use that form for a while, because it's going to take time for all those industry records to get reported to the PRD system. So yes, we're going to have both PRD and the -12 and 12A for a while. And then by September of 2024, the transition will be complete and you won't need the -12 or 12A anymore. And there actually is a way to request those outstanding records during the transition via the PRD system. But for sure, go check out the AC 12068 for details on that process. And let's see what else we have here. So I see one that says, talks about starting to add records in June. The important thing about the drug and alcohol records and reporting them in June, the drug and alcohol reporting that you do today, and also the requesting that you do, those are actually under a separate regulation from DOT. And so PRD isn't changing anything about some of those requirements. The only thing that's changing is that you will report certain drug and alcohol events to the PRD system. So those records are then available to future employers. The AC goes into a lot more detail about exactly what records regarding drug and alcohol needs to be reported. So I would for sure point you over there. And if you have any questions after you look at that, then you can either contact us at PRD support@FAA.gov, or if it's really a drug and alcohol question, we're probably going to just refer you over to the Drug and Alcohol Office, because really that's their program, the sharing of drug and alcohol records. So if you still have questions about that, even from here, for sure, shoot us an email so we can answer you a bit more comprehensively.
Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome. Let's see if there's anything else in here I can answer for you. Oh, this is a good question, actually, that I want to share. It said, what information is required in PRD and in what format, starting June 10th? And that's a great question. And of course, the super short answer is, well, it's in AC 12068. That's not really a great answer, though, for the webinar. So let me see if I can give you just a little bit of idea. Generally, what we're talking about is the PRD is not going to receive like scanned or digital copies of these pilot records. It's going to receive instead key data points about events and about certain records. Like, for example, let's say that you're a 135 operator and you need to report a check ride or something for an airman. You would only report to PRD the date, the type of check, the aircraft involved, the result of the check, that sort of thing. So you're not going to be scanning, the 8410, for example, and uploading that thing. So hopefully that's helpful to you on that one. Let's see what else we have here that we can answer for you guys. So there's a question from Tom that says, what does the presentation for June cover? Which documents have to be added? And I think we've sort of already discussed that. So PRD is not going to take actual documents. It's just going to take records. We will talk some about the record types in June, but really June's going to focus more on the actual functionality of how do you actually report the records. But as part of that discussion, we will mention, what records have to be reported. But you don't have to wait for June. You can just go to AC 12068 Juliet. There's an appendices in the back that outlines all that stuff, so you guys can check it out. So there's another question that says, if we haven't used PREA in the past, can we do everything we need to do in PRD instead? The answer for right now is no, because there is a transition period between PRD, Part 111, and PREA. We've had PREA since 1996 or 1997, and it's going to take about 3 years to actually complete the transition from PREA and the way that we've done business that way over to Part 111 or PRD. So right now, it's really better to think of PREA and PRD as two parallel processes. Fortunately, a lot of them are tied together, which means you can satisfy, two birds with one stone, so to say. So, but the best answer is just to keep them in your mind that they're two separate processes, although they're very similar. And we'll have it that way until September 2024. There's another question. Is there information available on what file formats to send the records? And that's another great question. Initially in June, the file format, it's really going to be a web-based form in June. So, and we'll have demonstrations of that, like Stacy will show you, but you'll go into the PRD website and there'll be a form that you can just fill out the information. In the future, and really not that far off, we're talking about later this year, we will release an API that would allow operators with electronic record keeping systems to be able to electronically upload records into PRD. So if that gets your interest and you say, oh my gosh, yes, that's what we want to do, then probably the best thing to do was just email us at PRD.FAA.GOV and just express your interest in the API if you want to get information, and we can kind of point you in the right direction. Otherwise, just kind of stand by and wait. I think you'll see it around September of this year. We should be releasing our API standard around then. And of course, we'll advertise it via the website. I'm sure we'll have some webinars about it and that sort of thing too. But hopefully that can help you out. There's not currently a test site. That's another question we have here. There's not currently a test site for uploading these records. And it's important to note that in June, when the system becomes active, it's not a test system. It's an actual production system where you'll be reporting pilot records. So I know it'd probably be more helpful if there was like a way to, play with some dummy records and kind of play around with it. But we just don't have that luxury, unfortunately, starting in June. So there's that one. There's a question here about the drug consortium required to upload random results. The short answer, I don't think so. I would say email us that question and let us make sure we point you to the right office to give you the right answer on that one, because I don't want to, drug and alcohol is an entirely separate office. So I really don't want to point you the right direction. We have a question about the user guide and when it's going to be available. And what the person's asking about is, are we going to produce some information about how do you actually report records? And the short answer is yes, of course. And we expect to publish that information to PRD.FAA.GOV by the 11th of May. So if you're super keen to see, well, how will I report records? What are some screenshots and that sort of thing? Keep an eye on the website, PRD.FAA.GOV, and you will be able to see that on May 11th. Another person asked if records can be edited later in PRD. And the short answer is yes. Yes, if you report a pilot record and you need to change it or amend it, you can do so at a later date. But I will mention you cannot delete records. So that's kind of helpful to know. And let's see, looks like we're kind of getting down to the end of the question list here. Oh, it's a good question here about NDR records. Will PRD answer will it contain National Driver Register records? And the answer is no. NDR records is a completely different system. PRD can't access that system. It's not an FAA system. It's completely unrelated to the records available to the agency. So there's basically not a technology way to get from here to there. So operators that need to request NDR, and NDR continues to be a requirement under Part 111, you'll have to continue to request those records outside the PRD system. And there is a question, can we preview the form to see? And that's going to basically, I'm going to point back to the May 11th deadline. That's when we're going to publish directions how to report records. So just keep an eye on our website, PRD.FAA.GOV, and we will have that for you on May 11th. There's a question about what's the frequency expected to report records. That's actually a really great question. And I'm going to just tell you the regulatory answer, which is from Part 111. And of course, there's a lot of details in this answer that I can't cover, but just super high level. Generally speaking, new pilot records are reportable within 30 days of creation. So the frequency of how often you have to report records, well, it kind of depends on how often you create records. So, but 30 days from record creation is the deadline to have the record reported to PRD. There's, of course, lots of exceptions, but if you take a look at AC 12068, it discusses that quite a bit. I see there's a question about changing your login email. As Stacy pointed out, that the MyAccess login email, MyAccess is a separate system from PRD. So we really have to point you over to the help desk, and you can email those folks at helpdesk@FAA.gov. That's helpdesk@FAA.gov. And that information is also provided on the MyAccess login page. There's a little link that says help desk information, and those folks can help you. The PRD support staff, we can't help you with changing your email because MyAccess is a separate system that we can't really support. And there's a question about what's the next requirement for air carriers. Well, that's I guess that could be a really simple question. So the next requirement that isn't already in place is the June 10th requirement. That's the next deadline. And that's a pretty big one though, because June 10th is the date that you have to start reporting certain pilot records into the system. And then probably the next date after that, that's in Part 111, is going to be June of 2023. So that's a year later. And really that's just got to do with, finishing reporting certain historical records. You guys are all asking some great questions.
I see one here that's for the pilot records. It sounds like it's not uploading actual documents, but data entry. And that's correct. The PRD does not accept PDF files. It's data entry points to record the information.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. Thank you, Stacy. And I just see one more open question, and it's kind of related really to the one we just had, and that's about, reporting information. Essentially, yes, if you're not using the API to electronically report records, then you would have to use the manual web form to report records. So, and I don't see any other open questions that aren't being answered. So, see, as quick as I say that, Stacy, people have more questions.
Yeah.
So I'll answer the API question. When will the API be available? So the API, which of course is used for electronic record reporting, these specifications will be available approximately September of this year. And so that's when industry should be able to get a look at the standards, that your system would need to comply with to report records. And then we anticipate in December having the system actually online to receive records. So I'm not seeing any other open questions. A lot of really good feedback. Don't you agree, Stacy?
Well, there is one last question here asking if the user manager can remove the original RP. And the answer to that is no. All the requests for RPs will come through the PRD support team. It will review the information in our records to approve or inactivate the RP's account, since you can only have one active RP at a time.
I think Carrie's asking a question about the webinar for the reporting records. And it's a great question. She's asking, can we push up webinar 3 sooner? In all reality, probably not. And that's just the quickest that the team was ready to have that material available. So so probably not going to be able to move that one up. If we'll look at it for sure, and if we can find a way to move that one up, we'll make every effort to. Because I realize that you would like to have that, for the 10th. It's just the way the webinar schedule landed, that was the spot we could put it in there. But we'll certainly reconsider it. And if we can get it done sooner, we'll advertise it at PRD.FAA.GOV. I see there's a question about, do you have to use the PRD plus the dash, the 8060 forms to request records? And the answer is essentially yes. And that's because you have to keep in mind that we have PREA still in effect, even though we have Part 111 in effect. And although industry will start to report pilot records in June, it's going to take a long time, to report historical records in particular. So, like even though we start June 10th, well, June 15th, if you hire a pilot and you go to PRD, you will see FAA records, but will you see any previous employer records? Well, maybe, right? You might see 1 or 2 records possibly. It's kind of luck of the draw, especially when you first get started there. So you can either use the 1111A, to request those records. There will also be a process available in PRD to where if there are no pilot records reported, essentially, or if there's still outstanding pilot records, like maybe they've entered a few of the records, if there's still more to go, you can actually request via the PRD system that the operator go ahead and report the rest of the records. So that's an automated process that happens on the website. And you can send that request to the previous employer, and then the previous employer essentially has 14 days to provide those outstanding records. So you can kind of use either method, the 8060 forms or PRD to get those records during the transition. I see someone's asking if they have a MyAccess account through another administration. Is that going to work on PRD? I think the answer is maybe. And the reason I say maybe is because we have seen operationally that there are other agencies that use MyAccess, but they have MyAccess configured differently than what the FAA uses it. So, like, for example, I know some military users have had MyAccess accounts and they try to use it in PRD, and PRD doesn't get the right information that it needs from that MyAccess account. So that might be one of those situations where even though we told you over and over, don't create another MyAccess account, you might actually have to have a separate MyAccess account. But I think I would try it. This is for Fred. I think I would try to log in using your existing MyAccess account. If the PRD system can't read the account properly, then you'll get an error message. And then I would think at that point, probably just email us, PRD@FAA.GOV, and we'll try and work you through that one. And someone is asking, what's an API? I'm sorry if I mentioned it quickly and didn't really explain it. So, and someone may correct me, but I believe it's application program interface. It's basically a way that 2 computer systems talk. It's like a standard. It's like it's like a dictionary between 2 computer systems. So having an API established for PRD means that other computer systems, as long as they can match the API, they can match that language, have the right data fields and that sort of thing, then almost anyone can send information to PRD if they have the appropriate roles and things. So, so that's what the API is. So another one says, if the employer does not upload the records within 14 days, can that be considered due diligence? And the short answer is no. If you were in the PRD system and you requested records and you saw that they were not all available, so you do the request records function in PRD, then they'll get a notification, the previous employer will, to provide those records. If they don't provide the records within 14 days, I would reach out to us, PRD@FAA.GOV, and we can work with the local FAA office and help you get those records. So due diligence is really about operators that have gone out of business and that sort of thing. But if you know the operator's in business and they have the records or just not providing them for some reason, then let us know and we'll help you get the records. There is a question from Rick. I'm sorry, Stacy, if I'm just jumping in, taking all these questions from you. You're like, no, Chris, please do. So a question from Rick. He says, for records completed on June 9th, are those considered historical or are they new? Well, those are considered historical. Thank you, Rick, for that question, because that is the demarcation line between what's a new record, which is what they're called in the AC, versus what's a historical record. So a new pilot record is anything generated on or after June 10th. So those would be reported within 30 days. There are a couple, of course, exceptions to that, but that's the general rule. And then anything that's before June 9th is going to be considered a historical pilot record and would get reported to PRD in the same schedule and such as historical records. I see we have a question. They said, who at the previous employer receives the request? And I think you're referring to if a potential new employer is requesting records from the previous employer, how does that work? So it depends on how the previous employer is registered in the PRD system. At a minimum, that request goes to the authorized responsible person. There is also another email account that previous employer can configure to receive these sorts of system messages. So if they've done that, it might go to like an HR department or something for processing. And I think that was the same question that that David asked.
Hey, Chris, we're going to have to wrap up. We're running out of time.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I see we're pretty much at 2 o'clock. So I think we basically got all the questions answered. And there is one last that's worth answering, and that is, where can you find this webinar if you want to see the presentation? And it's available at PRD.FAA.GOV. Give us a few days to get them posted there, but that's where we make this historical webinar information available. So Stacy, unless you have anything to add, I think that's a good place to end.
No, just thank you everyone for taking the time to attend today's presentation, and please check back with us as we announce more webinars in the future.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.